Mark Webber's name hanging over this story is exactly the kind of wrinkle that makes you stop and pay attention. Because when a manager starts planting ideas, it rarely stays private for long. And right now, those seeds are pointing toward one headline-grabbing possibility: Oscar Piastri to Ferrari in 2027. You've seen the headlines, and you probably felt that little jolt. Piastri is leading the title fight. He's young, hungry, and suddenly being framed as a potential future at the most iconic team in the sport. But don't let the drama distract you from the motive behind it. This smells a lot like pressure management. If you're sitting there asking whether McLaren really has Oscar's best interests at heart, you're not alone. And that's the angle Mark Webber appears to be playing. Remind McLaren that their current world championship leader has options if the team doesn't get its act together. That makes this more than gossip. It's a leverage play, and the timing matters. Piastri's form this season gives him negotiating power. McLaren's recent PR moves and internal friction create vulnerabilities, and Ferrari's potential seat openings in the coming years add fuel to the rumor mill. So what should you take away right now? First, don't assume a move is imminent. Think of this as a chess move, not the final checkmate. Second, consider the psychology. Managers leaking interest is often a tactic to change behavior inside a team, force faster upgrades, or shift how minutes are allocated between teammates. Third, if you're a fan of drama, this is gold. But if you're a fan of substance, you'll want to see how it ties back to the numbers and the team dynamics on the ground. Quick poll for you. If Piastri moved to Ferrari in 2027, would you vote yes or no in the comments? And tell me one reason why in a single line. I'll pin the best replies. If you're finding this useful, consider subscribing and hitting the bell to help us reach 2,000 subscribers. It really does help us keep up with every transfer rumor and deep dive like this. Now let's get into the numbers, because this is where the whole Piastri to Ferrari talk stops being just rumor fuel and starts looking like a management message wrapped in performance data. Over the last 5 races, McLaren has had a string of costly pit stop errors between both cars, and a disproportionate number of them have affected Oscar Piastri directly. If you've been watching closely, you probably noticed that every time Oscar is in the fight for a podium, something small but crucial goes wrong. A slow tire change, a mistimed radio call, or a strategic undercut that just doesn't land. It's the kind of pattern that makes fans talk about favoritism, and honestly, it's hard to ignore. McLaren insists everything's equal, but inside the paddock people are whispering about internal imbalance, the idea that Lando Norris remains the team's emotional and commercial center. That's exactly what Webber might be reacting to. He's not merely stirring headlines for noise, he's sending a message. Treat Oscar like you're number one, or someone else will. Remember, Webber lived this dynamic at Red Bull with Sebastian Vettel. He knows how quickly a talented driver can get boxed out when team politics brew. Ferrari, meanwhile, is watching this unfold with interest. With Lewis Hamilton in the latter stages of his career and Carlos Sainz already moved on, the Scuderia is quietly plotting for the next era, and a title-contending Australian with composure and pace fits the bill. So tell me, do you think McLaren is favoring Norris right now? Drop a yes or no in the comments and tell me your theory. I'll feature a few of the best takes. If you're new here, subscribe and enable the notification bell. Your support helps us keep producing these breakdowns from the heart of the paddock. Now let's shift from raw numbers to narrative, because how McLaren handled its own PR recently tells you everything about what's going on behind closed doors. After a rough sequence of pit blunders, McLaren's media team went into spin mode, releasing carefully worded statements that read as if they were trying to keep both drivers happy while subtly framing Lando as the leader and Oscar as the reliable challenger. Tiny word choices matter in Formula One. Calling someone the leader versus the consistent performer changes perception in fans, sponsors, and even inside the factory. Then, social media clips began to circulate spotlighting Norris's strategic feedback and media-friendly moments, convenient timing that felt like a push to re-establish hierarchy. Coincidence? Hardly. It's a clear sign that McLaren's PR is trying to anchor Lando at the emotional center of the team and keep Oscar in a quieter role, and that's exactly the kind of image that frustrates a driver and his manager. Behind the scenes, insiders suggest growing tension between engineers who favor Piastri's precise, methodical input and management and marketing personnel who prefer Norris because he's the recognizable face and the commercial asset. When those priorities clash, you get confused strategy calls, inconsistent pit work, and a lot of defensive messaging, the perfect living room for a manager like Webber to sow leverage. If you were Ferrari's team principal, Fred Vasseur, would you start quiet talks with Webber now, or wait to see if McLaren collapses under its own narrative? Vote now or wait in the why comments and tell me why. The best reasoning could get a shout-out in the next video. Let's dig deeper into the on-track side now, because raw pace and consistency are what make teams act. Over the past 10 qualifying sessions, Oscar Piastri has outqualified Lando Norris roughly half the time, and when both drivers have clean races, Oscar's average finishing position has been slightly higher. Not a huge gap, but enough to make engineers take notice. The more important detail is the kind of feedback Piastri gives. Veteran engineers describe it as unusually detailed for someone his age, and his setups often produce more predictable tire degradation. In plain terms, he's fast and consistent, the kind of driver who converts potential into points. So why does Norris still feel like the team's main man? Two reasons: time and branding. Lando has been the face of McLaren for years. The team built a commercial identity around him, which naturally translates into more visibility, more say in development conversations, and, according to whispers, a bit more influence in strategy calls. That's not unusual in F1, but it's risky when your second driver is matching results. Mark Webber sees this dynamic and knows how to exploit it. He remembers what it feels like to be the overlooked driver and how pressure leaks can force teams to change behavior. The Ferrari interest leak wasn't simply sensationalism. It was a calculated reminder to McLaren that they could lose their rising star if they don't treat him accordingly. So here's a direct question. If McLaren had to pick a number one driver for the long term today, who should it be, Norris or Piastri? Type Norris or Piastri in the comments and tell me why. I want to see how the fan base splits on this. Now, step back and look at the bigger paddock picture, because this isn't just a McLaren-Ferrari whisper. It's part of a wider ecosystem where governance, technical tools, and culture shape outcomes. The FIA election. Dynamics, where candidate lists and regional representation play a decisive role, affect how stable the sport feels at the top, and teams make long-term plans based on that stability. Meanwhile, technical factors like simulator performance matter more than most fans realize. Remember how Adrian Newey's comments about a poor Aston Martin simulator suggested a multi-year handicap to development? Those off-track issues, governance quirks, and simulation shortcomings change how teams approach driver recruitment and car development. In other words, the paddock is a web of politics and tools as much as it is of talent. All these threads converge on one consequence. The 2027 driver market could be the most politically charged in years, and Oscar Piastri may already be at the center. If Webber's hints weren't random, his timing was surgical. Dropping those whispers while Piastri leads the title fight and McLaren looks internally unsteady is a test to see who blinks first. Will McLaren publicly elevate Oscar, or will they stick with the established favorite and hope professionalism keeps tensions quiet? Either reaction gives Webber information. On Ferrari's side, don't forget their timeline. Lewis Hamilton's presence is a short to mid-term statement. Ferrari will need fresh pillars in the coming seasons. A calm, championship-capable youngster like Piastri fits that long-term puzzle perfectly. It's not about 2026 alone, it's about securing the next decade. Here's the kicker. Even if Piastri never moves to Ferrari, the rumor has already done its job. McLaren must now account for perception. Fans are talking, media are watching, and the team knows that their treatment of drivers is under a microscope. Expect more balanced praise from McLaren, fewer Lando-led narratives, and possibly public reassurances about equal treatment, not because of panic, but because perception matters in F1. So, final quick call to action. If you had to predict today, will Piastri still be in McLaren orange in 2027, or will he be in Ferrari red? Comment orange or red, and give the single reason you think that will happen. I'll feature the best answers in our next upload. If you've been with this deep dive from the start, please subscribe to Fast News F1 and enable the notification bell. Getting to our goal of 2,000 subscribers keeps this channel independent and lets us keep delivering the real stories behind the headlines. Thanks for watching. Remember, in Formula One, what's said behind closed doors often decides what happens on track, and the 2027 driver market might already be starting right under our noses.